Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Trinadapi Sunichena Taror Eva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Hare Nama, Hare Nama Iva Kevalam Kalo Nastyeva Gatir Anyata Shri Shudra Dvaja Bandhunang Trayi Nashruti Gochara Karma Shreyasi Mudhanang Shreya Evang Bhaved Iha Iti Bharatamakyanang Kripaya Munina Kritam. Out of compassion, the great sage Vyasadeva, being very kind to the ignorant masses of people, thought it wise to edit the Vedas. He did this so that the Vedas may become assimilated by less intellectual persons. This would enable them to achieve the ultimate goal of life. He thus compiled the great historical narration called Mahäbhärata, specifically for women, laborers, and friends of the twice-born. Chapter 25, Part 1. Yudhishthira teaches Arjuna the Pratismrita mantras. When the Brahmins determined an auspicious day, Yudhishthira taught Arjuna the Pratismriti mantras. The king had delayed teaching him, as he knew that Arjuna would leave for the Himalayas as soon as he had the knowledge. It would be difficult to live without him. But it was Vyasadev's desire that Arjuna go. So, Yudhishthira knew the separation could not be avoided forever. Ultimately, it was probably their only chance to be successful in recovering their kingdom. Taking Arjuna aside, Yudhishthira held him by the hands and said, O descendant of Bharata, the 4 divisions of the science of arms are held by Bhishma, Drona, Kripakarna, and Ashvatthama. They have all received divine instructions and know how to use every sort of weapon. Having been honored, gratified, and supported by Duryodhana, they always seek to do him good. We should not doubt that they will support him in battle. The whole world is now under Duryodhana's sway, and he is our avowed enemy. You, my brother, are our only sole refuge. Depending on you, we shall regain our kingdom from Duryodhana. Listen now as I tell you what should be done. Yudhishthira then informed Arjuna of Vyasadev's instructions. He told him that he should leave as soon as possible for the Himalayas, and by meditating on the mantras he was now going to repeat, he should seek the demigod's audience. He should do this in order to receive the demigod's respective weapons. Allow me to initiate you today, O virtuous one, and go at once to propitiate Indra. Being pleased with you, I am sure your father will give you his weapons, and by his order, so will the other demigods. Arjuna then fully controlled his mind and senses. With due rites, Yudhishthir bestowed the Pratismriti mantras on Arjuna. When he was finished, Yudhishthir stood up with tears moistening his eyes. His tears were moistening because he was thinking separation from Arjuna. Now go, dear brother. With his arms and hands clad in iguana skin gauntlets and gloves, and his body covered in golden armor, Arjuna took up his Gandiva bow and his 2 inexhaustible quivers and stood ready to depart. Brahmins and Siddhas uttered blessings upon him, and not knowing how long he would be gone, Arjuna bade an affectionate farewell to his brothers. As Arjuna was about to depart, Draupadi came before him and said, O mighty-armed Dhananjay, may all that the noble Kunti desired at your birth, and all that you yourself desire, be accomplished. May none of us ever take birth again in this terrible Kshatriya order. I offer my respect to the ascetic Brahmanas who are detached from this miserable world. My heart still burns with Duryodhana's insult. But today I grieve even more because you are departing. In your absence, we will spend our time thinking only of you. There will be no joy without you. All our hopes rest in you, O hero, my husband. May the Supreme Lord and all his energies protect you at all times, and may success be yours. Go now and attain your goal. Ram Ram Hare Hare. Part 2. Arjuna meets his father, Shakra. Arjuna smiled at Draupadi, circumambulated his brothers and Domya, and then began running swiftly along the path. He was frightening the creatures along the way because of his speed. By chanting the mantras Yudhishthir had given him, Arjuna felt himself traveling over mountains and forward at the speed of the mind. By the end of the first day, he arrived at the great Mandara mountain. Arjuna stopped and looked around. The mountain was very beautiful, with its bluish stone rising up into the clouds. It was covered with blossoming trees. Their many-colored flowers created rich tableaus, and their scent captivating his mind. The sound of peacocks, cranes, and cuckoos filled the air, and he could see Siddhas and Charanas sporting on the mountain slopes. Arjuna decided to climb the mountain and begin his austerities there. Upon reaching a plateau high on the mountain, he suddenly heard a voice resounding in the sky. "Stop!" Arjuna looked around and saw an ascetic. The ascetic was sitting at the foot of a tree. The brownish-orange-colored Brahmin had a brilliant aura. His lean body was covered in deerskin, and his matted locks hung down to his shoulders. The ascetic said, "O child, who are you? You appear to be a Kshatriya. Do you not know that this is the abode of peaceful Brahmanas? Brahmanas who are freed from anger? Even to have been able to reach this spot indicates that you already attained a high state of purity. But now you should perfect your life. You have no need of weapons here. Throw them away." Arjuna made it clear that he had no plans to renounce his weapons. "My dear Brahmana, I need my weapons. I need my weapons in order to serve my elder brother Yudhishthir. He has been wrongfully deprived of his kingdom. O Brahmana, I will not cast my weapons aside." Seeing Arjuna's dedication to duty, the ascetic replied, "O slayer of foes, I am pleased with you. Know me to be Shakra, king of the demigods. Now, ask me for a boon." Arjuna was overjoyed. Here was Indra. With folded hands, Arjuna said, "O exalted one, the boon I desire is that you bestow all your weapons upon me." Shakra Indra smiled. "O Dhananjay, I can grant you life in the celestial regions of bliss. You should ask for this. Why do you desire only my weapons?" Arjuna anger rose as he remembered Duryodhana's treachery. "How could I incur the world's condemnation by not avenging myself on my enemy and abandoning my brothers in the forest?" Indra spoke gently. "O child, when you meet Lord Shiva, then I will give you all my weapons. First try to propitiate him, for he is the greatest of the demigods. By seeing that three-eyed wielder of the trident, all your desires will be fulfilled." Part 3. Lord Shiva defeats Arjuna. After satisfying and after saying this, Indra disappeared. Arjuna was left alone. He decided to remain where he was. He began his austerities and worship of Shiva. He took off his armor and set his weapons down by the same tree where Indra had sat. The tree was situated next to a flowing river, and Arjuna bathed in its clear waters. Then he sat down to meditate. As he did so, conchs were heard in the sky, and showers of flowers fell from the heavens. Arjuna was pleased by the auspicious sign, and he sat with half-closed eyes. Controlling his breathing, he began to utter prayers to Lord Shiva. During the first month of his meditations, Arjuna ate only fruit every third day. During the second month, he ate fruit on every sixth day. And during the third month, he ate fruit once in a fortnight. During the fourth month, he lived only on air, standing on the tip of his toes with his arms upraised. He bathed 3 times a day and kept his mind and senses under perfect control. As a result of his austerities, Arjuna began to glow like the sun. Meanwhile, in the heavens, the celestial rishis grew anxious. They approached Lord Shiva and said, "Arjuna has become greatly effulgent. Due to his austerities on the summit of the Himalayas, the earth is becoming heated by his asceticism and is sending forth smoke. O chief of the demigods, you should stop him before he upsets the universal order by the power of his penance." Lord Shiva replied, "You need not feel anxiety on account of Falguna. He does not wish to attain heaven nor prosperity. I know his purpose, and I will satisfy him today." The rishis bowed before Lord Shiva and returned to their abodes. Lord Shiva then assumed the form of a tall, powerful, golden-hued hunter and descended to the place where Arjuna was meditating. Uma, his consort, accompanied him in a similar costume, as did many of his goblin followers, who all assumed various forms and wore bright garments and followed behind Uma and Shiva. Many of the female goblins assumed the forms of beautiful women, and they too descended. As Lord Shiva appeared on the mountainside with his followers, the mountain seemed ablaze with beauty. Strangely, however, all of nature became silent. Even the springs and waterfalls ceased their sounds. As Lord Shiva arrived, he saw a Danava demon who assumed the form of a boar and was charging at Arjuna. The demon intended to kill Arjuna. The demon boar roared loudly in challenge. Arjuna heard the boar's roar and quickly lifted and strung his bow, placing a virulent arrow on his bowstring. Arjuna called out, "I have done you no harm. As you seek to kill me, I shall certainly send you to Yamaraja's abode." At the same exact moment, Lord Shiva also aimed his bow on the boar and shouted to Arjuna, "Stop! This dark-colored boar is mine. I saw him first, and have already aimed my bow at him." Arjuna ignored Shiva's claim and released his arrow, which sped toward the massive boar. Lord Shiva simultaneously released his arrow, and the 2 shafts both struck the Danava boar simultaneously at the same time. Then there was a sound like thunder as the arrows hit the demoniac boar's rock-like body. The demon assumed his natural form and gave up his life with a terrible cry. "Ah!" Arjuna looked around at the hunter. His body shone like a golden mountain. He was surrounded by hundreds of women. Arjuna glared at him. "Who are you, dressed like a hunter and wandering this solitary forest, surrounded by your followers? Are you not afraid? Why have you pierced this boar which I targeted first? Do you not know that this is against all accepted practices of hunting? Indeed, you have insulted me, so now I will punish you by taking your life." The hunter replied with a smile, "O hero, you need not be concerned about me, for I always dwell in the forest. But what brings you here? You are obviously royalty, used to living in a luxury. How is it that you have adopted an ascetic life?" Arjuna held his bow tightly. "Depending on the strength of my arms, I live in this forest. Just see how I killed this fearful Rakshasa who was intent on killing me." The hunter laughed derisively. "No, it was I who killed this one, not you. I saw him first, and it was with my arrow that the demon was sent to death's abode. You are overly proud of your strength. Do not accuse others when you yourself are at fault. O wicked-minded wretch, you have wronged me, and will therefore not escape with your life. Stand and receive my arrows. Yes, try to defend yourself if you can." Infuriated, Arjuna immediately struck the hunter with a cluster of swift arrows. But the hunter simply smiled and received Arjuna's shafts without flinching. He called out, "O wretch, send your fiercest arrows, those that are capable of piercing the heart." Arjuna released another volley of shafts. Becoming angry, Lord Shiva sent back hundreds of his own arrows. Thus, a great battle then ensued. Showers of snake-like arrows sped back and forth. As Arjuna countered the hunter's arrows, he was surprised to see that although struck by countless shafts, his adversary, the hunter, was not at all affected. The Pandava Arjuna increased the force of his attack, but the hunter stood unmoved. Seeing that he could not shake his foe, Arjuna called out in admiration, "Excellent! Well done!" Arjuna looked at the hunter with wonder. Clearly, this was not an ordinary man. No one could withstand the force of thousands of arrows shot from his Gandiva without being moved. Perhaps he was a celestial. Arjuna then decided to use his mystical weapons. No matter who this was, even if he was a Gandharva or a Yaksha, unless he was actually Lord Shiva himself, Arjuna intended to kill this hunter. Arjuna then invoked weapons which fired thousands of arrows blazing like the sun. The hunter cheerfully received all of his shafts, just as a mountain receives a downpour of rain. But then, to Arjuna's amazement, he found that his celestial quivers were suddenly exhausted. How was that possible? Who was this who could swallow up his arrows? With what could he fight now? Arjuna raised his great bow like a club and rushed at the hunter. Arjuna struck him a number of heavy blows, but the hunter snatched away his bow and drew it within his body. The bow simply vanished. Arjuna then drew his sword and brought it down upon the hunter's head with all his strength. But the sword shattered to pieces. Arjuna was now afraid, but he continued to fight. This time he lifted rocks and boulders and threw them at the hunter. Arjuna tore up trees and slung them at the hunter, but it still made no impression. Arjuna's mouth smoked with wrath. He rushed at his foe and pummeled him with his fists. Lord Shiva struck him back, and thus a hand-to-hand fight ensued. They struck one another and grappled furiously, each seizing the other and shoving him with full force. Sparks and smoke flew from their bodies. Finally, the hunter released Arjuna, and Arjuna fell back dazed, practically unconscious. Arjuna looked at the hunter in astonishment. Arjuna had failed to make the least impression on him. Surely this must be the exalted Lord Shiva. No one else could have fought with such power. Arjuna then retreated to a distance and quickly fashioned an image of Lord Shiva from earth. He worshipped it with flowers, and as he did so, he saw flowers falling onto the hunter's head. Now there was no doubt. This was the deity he was seeking. Arjuna fell headlong at the demigod's feet, and as he did so, he felt all of his fatigue dispelled. Part 4. Lord Shiva. Part 4. Lord Shiva blesses Arjuna. Lord Shiva was pleased with Arjuna, and he spoke to him in a voice as powerful as roaring clouds. O Falguni, today you have satisfied me. There is no warrior equal to you in courage or patience. O best of the Bharata race, your strength is practically equal to mine. Formerly, you were a rishi, and you have now taken birth to serve the Supreme Lord's purposes. Soon, you will acquire the weapons with which to defeat your enemies, even if they be celestials. I shall bestow upon you my own irresistible weapon. Now I will give you the eyes to see me in my original form. Behold! Arjuna looked up and saw Lord Shiva with his 3 eyes holding a trident and a divine serpent draped around his bluish neck. Arjuna bowed down and prayed. O great God, O highly exalted one, you are the refuge of all celestials. Why, the very universe has sprung from you. You are Lord Vishnu in a different material form, and are unconquerable by demigods, demons, what to speak of human beings. O Shankara, pray, do forgive me. It was only to receive your audience that I came to this mountain at all. Please, pardon me for my rashness in fighting with you. I now seek your protection. Lord Shiva lifted Arjuna to his feet and embraced the Pandava. I have pardoned you, for you are Nara, the friend of Narayan. Previously, you too chastised the demon hordes at Indra's coronation. Krishna is that supreme Narayan, and with him you will again punish the wicked. O Bharata, take back your Gandiva bow. Your quivers will again become inexhaustible. There is no man on earth equal to you. Ask from me whatever you desire. Lord Shiva then handed the Gandiva bow to Arjuna. Arjuna then said, O Lord, if you are pleased with me, then I humbly ask that you bestow upon me your irresistible personal weapon. That weapon is known as Pashupata. With that weapon you destroy the universe at the end of creation. So with it, I may be victorious over Rakshasas, Danavas, Gandharvas, Nagas, ghosts and spirits. It will enable me to emerge successfully from the battle that I shall fight against Bhishma, Drona, Kripa, and the son of the Sutta Karna. Lord Shiva replied, O son of Kunti, I will give you this weapon, for you are capable of holding, throwing, and withdrawing it. Not even Indra, Yama, Kuvera, or Varuna knows the mantras to this weapon, what to speak of any human being. However, you must use it only against celestial fighters. The Pashupata should never be released at lesser enemies, else it may destroy the entire creation. This weapon is discharged by the mind, eyes, words, or a bow. No one in the three worlds of moving or non-moving creatures can withstand its force. Arjuna then bathed for purification and stood before Lord Shiva in order to receive the mantras. The demigod gave his weapon to Arjuna, and it then waited upon him, just as it waits upon Lord Shiva himself. When all the celestials saw the fearful weapon standing in its embodied form by the side of Arjuna, the earth trembled and terrible winds blew in all directions. Thousands of conches and trumpets were heard resounding in the sky. Lord Shiva then said, Now go to heaven and receive Indra's weapons. Lord Shiva then departed with Uma and his many followers. Chapter 25, Part 5. The Lokapalas bless Arjuna. When Lord Shiva was gone, Arjuna stood for a few moments gazing at the sky. He was awed by what had just transpired. He had just seen the demigod of all demigods. The unknowable deity had even touched him with his own hand. Arjuna now considered his enemies now have already been vanquished and all his ends accomplished. Now Arjuna possessed Lord Shiva's irresistible weapon. Although he could not discharge the Pashupat at human foes, its very possession made him feel invincible. While Arjuna stood absorbed in thought, Varunadev appeared before him. He was accompanied by the personified rivers and by many Nagas, Siddhas, and other lesser demigods. In attendance also was Kuvera, his body resembling pure gold, and seated upon a splendid chariot. Kuvera was accompanied by countless yakshas. They all stood before Arjuna, illuminating everything with their bodily effulgence. Arjuna also saw in the sky the Lord of Justice, Yamaraj. He was approaching on his chariot with mace in hand, and Yamaraj was flanked by the personified forms of death and time. On a nearby mountain summit, Arjuna saw Indra and his queen, Sachi, seated on the back of the celestial elephant Airavata and appearing like the rising sun. A white umbrella was being held over his head, and he was surrounded by Gandharvas and Rishis. They were eulogizing him with Vedic hymns. Arjuna chanted numerous prayers in praise of the demigods and offered them fruits and water. As he stood gazing in amazement, Yamaraj spoke, his voice as deep as autumnal rain clouds. Behold, Arjuna, all the world's protectors, the Lokapalas, have come here. We shall bestow upon you divine eyes. O sinless one, you were formerly the Rishi Nara. At Lord Brahma's behest, you have taken your birth as a mortal human being. You shall vanquish in battle the powerful Bhishma and the many other fierce warriors headed by Dronacharya. The enemies of the demigods, namely the Daityas and Danavas, have taken birth in the world of human beings. They shall all be slain in a great battle in which you will play the main role. Your fame on earth shall be eternal. Yamaraj offered his personal weapon, a celestial mace, to Arjuna. The Pandava received the weapon along with the mantras for hurling and withdrawing. After that, Varunadev gave Arjuna his inescapable Nagapasha nooses. Arjuna also received Kuvera's weapon, Antardhan, which could baffle and render unconscious the mighty Asuras. Then Indra spoke. O subduer of enemies, you shall perform a great work for the demigods. Now you must ascend to heaven. There I will give you my own weapon and other irresistible astras belonging to the celestials. My chariot, driven by my servant Matali, will soon carry you there. Chapter 25, Part 6. Arjuna goes to heaven. The Lokapalas then vanished, leaving Arjuna alone. As he looked up, he saw what appeared to be a second sun planet, and it was gradually increasing in brilliance in the sky. The whole region vibrated as the radiance increased. Arjuna realized that this was Indra's chariot descending to earth. The chariot was huge, and it was drawn by 10,000 celestial horses. The horses were greenish and golden in hue. Matali, clad in golden armor, was holding the reins. As the chariot approached, Arjuna could see upon it innumerable swords and maces, as well as different kinds of missiles. There were axes, darts, lances, and spears of every kind, all placed around the chariot. Celestial thunderbolts and brilliant lightning bolts glowed from its sides. Huge-bodied, fierce Nagas with fiery mouths were seated on the chariot, along with great silver cannons furnished with wheels capable of sending celestial missiles at a vast distance. Arjuna saw Indra's dark blue flagstaff, known as the Vijayanta, standing in the middle of the chariot. It was standing as straight as a bamboo and as tall as a great palm tree. Then the chariot halted, and Matali stood before Arjuna. Bowing low, he said, "O fortunate one, I have been instructed to take you to Shakra. Your father, encircled by the celestials, rishis, Gandharvas, and Apsaras, wishes to see you in heaven. Lord Shiva has also ordered me. Ascend this chariot and come to the heavenly regions." Again Arjuna bathed for purification, and then he offered prayers to Mount Mandara. O King of mountains, you are the refuge of pious sages who seek heaven. You have sheltered me, and I have lived here very happily. I offer you my thanks and bid you farewell. With that, Matali led Arjuna to a flight of crystal steps leading up to the chariot. Matali urged the steeds, which drew the chariot with the speed of the mind. It went high into the sky. As they entered the celestial regions, Arjuna saw thousands of wondrous chariots carrying shining beings of great beauty. Arjuna saw kings and warriors who had been slain in battle, but who had attained effulgent celestial forms. As they moved along the paths of the demigods, Arjuna saw Siddhas, Charanas, Rishis, Guyakyas, and Apsaras. The whole region glowed with a brilliance born of the ascetic merits of such beings. Amazed, Arjuna inquired into their identities. The charioteer replied, "These are pious persons, O son of Kunti, stationed in their respective spheres. You have seen their shining abodes from the earth. You have seen them as the many stars in the firmament." The chariot passed through the gate of Indra's planet. There Arjuna saw Airavata, the great white elephant with 4 tusks. The elephant resembled Mount Kailas with its 4 summits. Passing through divine regions meant for pious men who had performed great sacrifices and asceticism, they arrived at last in Amaravati, Indra's capital city. Arjuna then gazed with wide open eyes at this most astonishing city. Flowers from all the seasons bloomed simultaneously, and there were groves of sacred trees. Fragrant breezes moved among their golden leaves, creating cascades of brilliant light. Countless mansions and palaces stretched into the distance. Arjuna then saw the famous Nandana gardens, in which demigods sported with apsaras. Those who turn their backs in battle can never see this place, Matali said. Seeing Arjuna's amazement, Matali then said, "Neither can those who are wicked-minded, who have not performed sacrifice, who have not abstained from liquor and meat, who have not bathed in holy rivers, those who have not given charity to Brahmins, none of these people can ever reach this abode of heaven." As they proceeded through the city of Amaravati, Arjuna beheld celestial cars traveling by the will of the occupant. Gandharvas and Apsaras eulogized Arjuna as he passed. He heard the sound of celestial music, and he heard the sounds of thousands of conchs and drums. Arjuna entered Indra's magnificent assembly hall and met with Sadyas, Maruts, Vishvedevas, and twin Ashvinis. He saw the Adityas, Vasus, Rudras, and the many royal saints headed by King Dilipa. Narada Rishi was also present, along with the Gandharva leader Tumburu. After offering respects to the assembled personalities, Arjuna approached his father, the king of the gods. Indra was seated beneath his white umbrella, and he was being fanned by golden-handled and perfumed chamaras. Many pure brahmanas praised him with hymns from the Rig and Yajurvedas. The Gandharvas and Charanas played celestial instruments of all descriptions for Indra's pleasure. Arjuna prostrated himself before Indra, who got down from his throne and embraced his son. The thousand-eyed demigod took Arjuna by the hand and led him back up the flight of golden steps to Indra's bejeweled throne. Indra then had his son sit next to him on the throne, where Arjuna shone like a second Indra. With his perfumed hand, Indra affectionately stroked Arjuna's head. Out of love, Indra gently patted and rubbed Arjuna's arms. Those arms were like gold columns. Indradev gazed without satiation at his son's face. Seated together on the throne, Arjuna and Indra appeared like the sun and the moon together in a clear sky. Indra gave Arjuna the celestial sight to perceive Amaravati's divine beauty. The city was unimaginably opulent. The Pandava looked around at the numerous effulgent rishis who sat reciting sacred texts from the Vedas. Groups of Gandharvas, headed by Tumburu, sang hymns in voices which entirely captivated the mind. As they sang, Apsaras performed exquisite dances full of gestures and sidelong glances. They shook their breasts and moved their broad hips. Celestials offered Arjuna the sacred Arghya and washed his feet. Upon Indra's command, Arjuna was then escorted to the palace of Lord Indra. Arjuna took up his residence there And Indra instructed him in how to use celestial weapons. And he